All right. So just wanted to give you guys a quick example of how you can pull up Google Earth and look at the history of the property and its surroundings, especially if you're worried about any like previous flooding. So it's not 100% foolproof because there's some kinks in Google Earth, but you can get a general idea. So you just take the property, put in the address, go over here to this little, looks like a clock. Okay, and that'll pull up the history. And so you'll have to play with these gauges right here to zoom in. I think one zoom is just about right. And you go back. So we're going to go to 8/30 of 2017. Now this one said that it had flooding on Harvey, but you know what? It's weird because I don't see any water on the lot. It said it had flooding in Harvey and on the tax day floods. And right here, it's not showing any flooding at all. It's kind of odd. All right, guys. So this one was a little bit tricky as, um, well, I wouldn't say tricky, but it shows that you really got to pay attention, especially when it comes to previous flooding on these properties. If that, if that's a concern, which it should be, you got to take that into account. So this property, the seller's disclosure, it stated that they had previous flooding during Harvey and during tax day floods. So I just want to make sure I get this information in front of my client. So a lot of the times, what I'll do is I'll pull up Google Earth, and no problem, it will show me that there was water on the property. Every once in a while, you'll pull it up, and something will be off on the whatever that satellite image was taken for that day. It looks like it just didn't capture that specific site, but for some reason the it just didn't show that it had flooding anyway. So luckily the seller's disclosure said that it did. I pulled up some other properties in the area that also stated that they had tax day flooding and they had flooding during Harvey. A lot of properties were torn down and then rebuilt back up. Some of them were rehabbed and renovated and repaired and then put back on the market. So this specific property was owned by an investor and has been carrying flood insurance. And so, I just need to get this in front of my client so that they can make the best decision possible for themselves. The big thing is figuring out how much your flood insurance is going to potentially be. So when you're in a flood zone or if you've had previous flooding on a property, typically that flood insurance is going to skyrocket quite a bit. Average flood insurance, I mean, you're looking at around $450 a year. Um, for a non for flood zone X. So it's not required by your mortgage provider to obtain flood insurance. But if you are in a flood zone, then it could go up to over $1,000 a year, maybe even more than that. So um, I ran this information over to insurance colleague of mine, asked him if he could give me a quote. What he needed me to provide him was the elevation certificate because it does show that it's in a flood zone. So reached out to the listing agent. Luckily, the listing agent had the elevation certificate. I got it over to the insurance provider so he can give my client, quotes on what they're looking at in regards to flood insurance. So I want to get all this information to them before we even submit an offer on the property, because by the time we're under contract and by the time that we are in and going through our option period, my client's going to have more skin in the game, and it's going to make it a little bit more difficult for them to back out of a contract should this be something that they don't even want to deal with to begin with. So I'm going to put all this information in front of my clients. And if they say, look, we just don't want to deal with a property that has flooding, then we can walk away. No harm, no foul. They've not lost any money. They've not lost any time. And now we know that we need to really look out for these properties that have flooding issues. We can address it immediately. So if they show some interest, or if we're sending them properties, we can weed out anything that has had any flooding on the property prior to um, to them being listed on the MLS. So just something to keep in mind. A lot of times what happens is this stuff is not discovered until you are well within a contract. And so what happens is by that time, you've already got your inspection money tied into it. You got your option fee. Inspections around $450, $500 sometimes. Option fee can be anywhere from 200 to 300, even more. You've got earnest money tied in, which you do have some protection on it, but um, I mean, it's still you still got to get both parties to sign off to release it if you're going to back out of the contract. And then if you get a um, really fast moving lending a lender involved and they've already run the appraisal on the property, that's even more money that you got tied into this house. And then come to find out the house has been flooded and now you want to back out. It's not yeah, you're going to get your earnest money back more than likely, but you've lost all of that money that you got tied into it up front. um, and we can prevent that by doing some little bit of research ahead of time. So if you have any questions about how to research this stuff, how to research whether a property's been flooded, let me know. I can point you in the right direction. Got a lot of great insurance providers that I work with, and they can track this stuff down, see if the house has had any claims run on it. But a lot of times you got to do some investigative work to figure out this stuff. But it's really not that hard. And I think that it should be done ahead of time before you get yourself into a contract and into a binding agreement with the seller. So let me know if you have any questions. Hope you guys have a great day and see you next time. Bye. All right, guys. So I'm going to give you an example of what it looks like when you pull up a property and you can see that there was previous flooding per the satellite image. So not a lot of people are aware of this. And once again, I want to just remind you, this is not 100%. Okay. So if you have any concerns that there's some flooding, this is just one of the steps that you can take to get an idea of whether or not there was flooding on the property, and you can get a visual image. A lot of times you type in the address or you type in the subdivision and then Harvey flood, and you'd be surprised how many videos people took. And they have YouTube videos of that neighborhood. I've actually had a list or a property that client was interested in, typed in the subdivision, address pulls up, and then somebody made a YouTube video and it showed that exact property underwater. And in that instance, seller did not disclose that it had flooding. So at least we were able to determine that before we went under contract. Um, a lot of times people don't take that extra step. So, okay, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back to a couple days after Harvey. This is 9/3/2017. Here is 8/9/2, and then 8/30. All right. This is on August 30th of 2017. There's the water. And the property that my client was interested was actually like right around this area. So, I mean, by looking at it, you can tell that they definitely more than likely had water in the property. Okay. All these folks, unfortunately, were underwater. Did not say that in the disclosure. And so my client ultimately decided to go somewhere else based on this information I provided. I've looked at the property now and it is under contract. Under contract. Maybe the buyer knows, maybe they don't, but during the course of the contract, as long as they're not doing a cash deal, it should come up. If they ran insurance claim or something like that, they should find out. But by that time, they're going to have had money tied into the property. So it's going to be a little bit harder for them to terminate the contract, in my opinion. So just something to be aware of. If you have questions about it, let me